You know the phrase that pays. Kank. I love it. Yo, Steve Conley, what is that tone?
Oh, hey. Oh,
Hello.
hey.
Hello. What is
Oh,
that
hello.
tone that you have there?
This was a
Stone
proof of Becoming Frazetta, the book I helped design. That's kickstarting right now. So I'm going to put this up here. It's on the Kickstarter. Check it out. But yeah.
Where's the Kickstarter? Where's the Kickstarter? Do we have a...
Do we have a thing for you?
I'll put a link in the chat if we can, but it is glorious. This is a proof. They just did a print on demand of the 400-page hefty book.
Wow.
It's 9 by 12. It's all Frazetta, amazing cartoonist. I didn't quite know until I saw his other stuff. Who's that? I'd be remiss. I'm being remiss right now.
Yo, you can smash a ganglion on your wrist with that, and then flatten out real nice. Are you guys ready? Well, hello. Guys, welcome back to, it's the golden hour. You see my glow? It must be Wednesday. It must be 8 p.m. EDT. It must be Pinch Me, I Must Be Dreaming time. You know what it is. Pencil to Pencil is back on the air, back on your video scope, and we are loaded for bear. Speaking of Bear, hello to Bear Edwards in the chat. I would like to do some introductions. Guys, I am your first host. Your friendly neighborhood Grand Poobah is back. Jamar Nicholas, ladies and gentlemen. I hold a seat on the board of the National Cartoonist Society and also in the Philadelphia chapter chair. Go Birds. On top of all those cool things, I'm also a graphic novelist. I have a series at Scholastic underneath the graphics imprint called Leon the Extraordinary. Worst Friends Forever is in stores now. Tell them, Stone Cold.
Comment. Why don't you?
I love it. It's like we know what we're doing. But I would be remiss if I did not introduce my cohort, co-conspirator, and co-compadre. He's in title contention. He just beat Ricky Steamboat last week in a draw-off. That's right. He's coming back for the belt, you guys. Make the belt motion. Discount double check. Say hello to Stone Cold Steve Conley.
Folks, it's so good to see you. I'm packing everything you can't quite see over here. This is just boxes and stuff I'll be taking to Heroes Con this weekend. I'm so excited. But my name is Steve Conley. I write and draw the webcomic The Middle Age, and I make D&D stuff like Nibblemancy. But you can check out The Middle Age over at Webtoons Tap is Go Comics. My own website, episode 326, just went live. I know Mike does about 326 episodes a week, but this still seems like a lot to me. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Tower Power, the Man of the Hour, Too Sweet to Be Sour, the maestro of mark making, the mercurial, the mirthful, the magnificent Mr. Mike Manley.
I love it. Hello.
Hello, everyone. I'm a miracle of made marks.
I love it.
I am Mike Manley. I'm a over 40-year veteran of this crazy cartooning business who's drawn everything, including your childhood. Right, when you were crying on the floor in Toys R Us because you couldn't get that G.I. Joe, Grandma probably gave you a comic book I drew.
Wow.
Or beat you with it in public.
Rolled it up. Boy, I told you, when we get in this store, don't ask for nothing.
That's right. Don't ask about a Mike Manley comic book.
Don't ask for Alpha Flight. I love it. It's funny. I just was talking about this a little earlier today. A lot of people know that I am a dyed-in-the-wool Gen Xer, right? So is Steve, and Mike's in a different age bracket, but we won't fault him for that.
I'm at the
You're at the like
end of the baby boom.
yeah, you're at the end of the boomer. Okay, boomer.
Yeah.
Wait, what did JRD say last week? Or okay, YouTuber. I have kind of subscribed by no fault of my own to a lot of Gen X nostalgia, like pages and stuff. You know, like what's kind of populating through your feed or your short reel wall.
And it's always suggesting it to you. Like
Yeah.
every day it's suggesting.
And you know, it's kind of like, remember this. It is like like a Holly Hobby oven or like Light Bright or something like that. And I get the feels for a minute. And I just had this thought the other day. Am I living in the past?
Yes, you are.
Is that a bad thing? Because the next part of this, I said this to somebody, I feel like we're living in the timeline where Biff Tannen stole the almanac. And this is kind of just where we are now. And I just feel like maybe it was warmer, it was cozier back then in the crack era. In Reagan times. But I don't know. I just almost felt like I had too much nostalgia. You know, it just
There's more stuff. Each generation has more stuff on top of the stuff that the previous generation had. Right? So like in the early 70s, people were nostalgic for the 50s. And now if you grew up in the 70s, you got the people in the 50s nostalgic wave in the 70s, and now you're nostalgic for the stuff in the 80s, which includes the stuff in the 70s and the stuff in the 50s.
Yeah.
So each generation gets their own particular generation's nostalgia, plus the stuff that you were exposed to from the previous generation's nostalgia.
Man, that's a lot of hopscotch right there. So, but kind of to that point, and maybe to bring it back to cartoons, but we also, as cartoonists, were also students. We love the old stuff.
Well, most of us do. Not everybody, but most of us do.
Right. So I mean, yeah. But
I do think there's a break. There's a generational break where I don't think people care.
Mm-hmm.
I think once you cross the meridian, and I think there's distinct meridians, right? There's the over 40, under 30, under 20, right? And I was actually having this discussion with some other cartoonists last week, and we basically came up with the reason is that if you're my age to your guys' age, you saw on TV tons of reruns because that's all they had to run. There was not as much new programming, but each generation had more new programming on top of the old programming, and there was definitely a switch over starting in around 2000 when the rise of Nickelodeon, because remember it used to be Nick at Night, and that ran all the old stuff, right? Yeah. Then it went away, and Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network used to run old stuff, but then they started making enough new stuff. They didn't run as much of the old stuff. They moved the old stuff to like different time slots, not as favorable time slots. Right. And then they moved it all the way off to Boomerang. And now nobody gets Boomerang. So people were getting that stuff.
It's like Me Too now, right?
Right.
Me TV, not Me Too. Hashtag Me Too is a whole other thing.
Right. So that has been moved off of. You can get it on your cable if your cable carries it, but it's on terrestrial TV, right? And so each generation now there's young people under the age of 30 who never saw the Flintstones, never saw all the different permutations of. They know Scooby-Doo, but they may have actually never seen the original Scooby-Doo.
Oh, like the Scooby-Doo mysteries with Don Knotts, that kind of stuff.
Right, yeah. They may not have ever seen that because that's not shown now. They've got like 5 other versions of Scooby-Doo that they've been shown. Or maybe they only saw the live action or
do you think something's do you think this is a what's the takeaway from this? What's the takeaway from the consuming different stuff?
Well, from the guys I know who are working in animation, and I've actually experienced this talking to students, you have people working in the business who know so little about the history of the business that they're working in that you may reference something that they don't. Right. It's like, what are you talking about? You know, I don't get that, right? So you may tell a student, oh, that's like something from the 80s, and then you realize that that person has never seen almost anything from the 80s, including many Disney films, things like that from the 80s. They've never seen The Terminator. They've never seen The Highlander. They've never seen Rambo. They've never seen Predator. There's a lot of stuff that the young people coming up now just didn't see. And so in comics, in animation, as a kid, you see whatever's on the dial in front of you, right?
Right, yeah.
You're like flipping around. Oh, I want to watch this.
Right? McHale's Navy's on.
Right, exactly. Right. So it does affect the lineage and therefore even the appreciation of things, because I think a lot of people can't appreciate or don't appreciate just because they were never exposed to it. I mean, there's tons of cartoons that we saw as kids, like, you know, Go Go Gophers, or a lot of the Rocky and Bullwinkle, the whole Jay Ward stuff.
It seems like.
Right. You know, Commander McBragg, all of the stuff we watched, it was like on TV until probably the early 80s, maybe, regularly. Mm-hmm. So now you have, what, almost 40 years, easily 40 years of kids, which is a whole, if those kids were born in 1980, they're middle-aged. And they never saw that stuff. And their kids never saw that stuff.
Right.
So you guys who are in your 50s love Transformers, right? And spend money to buy the old Kenner Star Wars stuff. Right. To a 10-year-old, they're like, whatever.
Right. Whatever, boomer.
Right. They're not going to spend $50 on, you know, Snake Eyes, you know, Sauna Hideaway or something, you know.
Yeah, you just triggered me when you said that. But, you know, there's another thing I just saw, which is interesting, and we'll get the show started, and hello to the chat. There's like one thing that I've seen over the years since the internet has been around is young parents sharing their childhood with their kids, right? And like I have a lot of friends who are like hardcore Star Wars nerds, and that's like it's almost like giving your kid the birds and the bees talk. It's like, all right, we're watching episode 4 tonight. Are you ready for this? You know what I'm saying? So I saw this clip of this I don't know who's filming this, maybe the wife, but this guy is on a couch with his kids, and they're watching Karate Kid. And the kids are like it's at the very end, they're at the tournament, and the kids are like this. The dad wouldn't shut up. Like he's in his moment, but he's kind of like, put him in a body bag. And the girl goes, what's a body bag? Well, you know, when you kill somebody and then you like put the never mind. You sweep the leg. And the kids like are almost like getting distracted by this dude like having his moment. So it's like kind of let your kids enjoy things, but at the same time, I don't know, it was weird. Like and the comments were like, yo, shut up. Let them watch it. We don't want to see your commentary. So I guess that's more of a modern nerd problem. Like if you ever go to the movies with somebody and they're like and you didn't see it, but they saw it, and they're like, "Yo, Steve, watch."
Pause. No, of course, you're noticing here the blockade runner, which was originally the Millennium Falcon.
Oh, but that's like every MCU movie. The dads taking their kids, they're explaining every Easter egg in the background.
Yeah. Oh, that's Wolverine's cowl. Man, shut up.
Yeah.
I don't know how we got here, but it's kind of like, is maybe, kind of when people say things like, I wish I could start over again so I could be surprised by Empire Strikes Back.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's like ruined because you know it all now. So I wonder if there's that same kind of feeling about comics.
I don't know. I mean, comics are I think are weird because they're mass appeal, yet they're so much smaller, and I don't think that there honestly is anywhere near the nerddom for comic strips, comic books, comics art that there is for something like Star Wars. You're not going to have, unless you're really an artist or you're really deep in the cut inside baseball, you're not going to be talking about the difference between, Ditko and Romita and Ross Andrew and, Todd McFarlane or, people, even a lot of people that are big fans of stuff, collectors. If you're not an artist, you only chew on that so much.
Right.
You like Spider-Man and you have favorite issues, and maybe that artist wrote that favorite issue, or maybe they drew that favorite issue. But once you go beyond that, it's really inside. The people watching this podcast are inside baseball, right? We can sit down and tell you all the he begat this guy, they get this, go all the way down. And if you're really not an artist, it's really not that. It's not going to make that much sense to people. They like Charles Schultz, but they're not going to talk about the different Charles Schultz, right? Because the 80s Charles Schultz was not the 60s Charles Schultz, was certainly not the 50s Charles Schultz, right?
Sure.
Well,
it's curious about it because also it gets to the aging of comic books and the audience of comic books. Because right now, I mean, you're talking about nostalgia, how those are the big Kickstarters at the moment. There's like the big collection of Gargoyles or Darkwing Duck or Transformers or G.I. Joe or Thundercats, all this stuff that was from our childhood. Those are huge Kickstarters with a few thousand people. I imagine the demographics of those are all, a bit of gray in a lot of those backers who have the credit card, who are willing to, on $100 that they'll charge for a few months.
A bit of gray publishing brings you
salt and pepper press
brings you cookies, a nap, and some Transformers. If you get the stretch goals are a foam mat,
a hard candy or two.
Yeah, Chips Ahoy, bag of Chips Ahoy.
Some Werthers. Well, I mean, I watched this essay, which is kind of like, it's kind of common knowledge, but they're kind of putting air to it that somewhere in the past 10 years, the toy companies have finally figured out that the people that's buying this shit are old guys.
Sure.
Right? And kids don't want it. And and this is, I'm talking about maybe a different type of outlier where your kid really loves Clone Wars because you watched Star Wars with them and they want the Admiral Rex toy or whatever. I think we're not talking about that. Right. We're talking about as I told you about the new G.I. Joe stuff that's coming out, and dudes are dropping $400 on a his tank that's like this big. You know what I mean? And they bought like 8 of them because they can, but that's not for Jimmy, and they know that. You know what I mean? So
I remember when they were putting out, this is when I was actually working on the shows, the Batman, Superman shows, and they were putting out Kenner was putting out the figures.
Mm-hmm.
There were guys getting jobs at Toys R Us so they could open up the boxes when the toys got in and took all the Harley Quinn out.
Yep.
They just go, okay, I'll buy these. So they
Yep.
got a job at Toys R Us just so they could get those toys. So they actually never made it to the shelves.
Nope.
No kid ever got to buy the Harley or whatever, whatever Poison Ivy or what. I remember that was like a big thing. People were complaining.
That's the inside track on like hardcore collectors. They know the guy, like, you can name it. It could be comics, it could be Pokemon cards. Have you seen the videos of people like ransacking the Costco because the new Pokemon cards came out? And it's like Black Friday scrums in the middle
Excellent.
of Costco. It's like, are you serious? Like people with fist fighting. It's real.
Wow.
Because that's the new hot Gem Mint 10 thing is Pokemon cards.
Right, and they don't want it for their collection. They want it to flip.
Yeah, it's all the aftermarket flippers and scalpers and all that other kind of stuff.
Oof.
I seen them like this one guy. I don't, you go into Costco, one of those wholesale clubs, and they just have a pallet. The thing goes beep, 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 drops it, and it leaves. The doors open, they ran straight to the pallet. And people were just taking like 30 kits.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And, whatever. Somebody might get their hand bit. That's kind of what's going on. And it sounds really ridiculous, but those guys know a deal. They know how to get in. Like Mike said, you got to know the guy who runs the game.
Just got off of I-95. It's heading to the Blue Route.
Yeah, the guy, the manager at the GameStop. So
Right.
you can get even at the comic book store, there's some guys that always come in and they got to have the perfect issue.
Uh-huh.
It may be mania, but it's kind of what it is, right? So like that's like maybe another level to it, but people know what they're doing.
The first time I remember that was actually all the way back before I moved out east. I remember when Walt Simonson's Thor came out, and there were people supposedly driving around southeast Michigan, northern Ohio, going to 7-Elevens and buying that comic off the stands or off the racks because it was a hot comic.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that was, 1979, 1980, somewhere in there. And I remember Norm, the guy ran my local comics shop, was talking that there were guys going around. And that was the beginning of that speculation where people would go around and buy, comic would come out, would be hot, and then people would go around, because you could go to a lot of places where they sold them on a newsstand, right? And they would just go buy them off the newsstand. So you could find it. And then you put it up on the wall, or you put in the buyer's guide, oh, you want that? I got me a copy of that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think Howard the Duck #1 was like that. I think there were certain comics.
I remember for 7-Eleven, people went in and they bought all the Smurfs #1 because ask your grandparents what the heck a Smurf is. And it was a super popular thing. It was a super popular little collectible toy. It was a TV show that was quite popular. And then Marvel did a comic book. And oh boy, that was like the Venn diagram of collectability. And so people had it's still worth cover price if you have a good copy. It's just because they made so many and sold so many. All that stuff. It's so weird that comics became this form of entertainment, this form of literature that is served in collectible form. That you have to buy it in this pristine state, immediately put it in a bag once you're done reading it. And that wasn't, again, we romanticize the idea of, well, we used to fold our comics in half or trade them with our friends or chuck it to our friend across the room and they would grab it and read it.
Right.
Or we would read our coverless copies that we got out of the dumpster behind the 7-Eleven.
That's not all I got out of the dumpster behind the
half a chocodile.
You got COVID out of that dumpster.
But yeah, the idea that it's this collectible format, and I like that even now modern distribution is running headlong into that. Now that Penguin Random House is used to shipping books, now find themselves shipping collectibles and getting all these returns because they're used to just putting these hardcover books or paperback books in a box, and no one's picking up their copy of James Patterson and making sure that it's not dog-eared.
I guess there is a little mania there, but it's not new. I guess that's kind of where we're going.
Well, that's what keeps we talked about this before. That's what keeps the business running.
Yeah.
It's gray-haired people, bagging, slabbing, nostalgia. That's what keeps the business going. People paying money to witness somebody signing something, getting a piece of paper that says, this person who you just saw actually did that thing that you just saw that person do. Without this piece of paper, that thing you just witnessed didn't actually happen.
Yeah, right? That's real. Yeah.
And all those little things appeal to a very, if you really think about it, a very small group of people, but they're willing to spend a lot of money to create these certificates of value for their collection, more than actually the enjoyment of actually reading or enjoying something, right?
Do you think that exists? Jamar, does that exist in the traditional publishing world at all? Is there a collectible market for? I mean, I know first editions are a big deal, but has that found its way into Smile, for a first printing of Smile? Or
I don't. You know what? I don't think so.
Yeah,
I don't think so. And I even recall at some point I talked to somebody about. I was curious if Leon had made it to like a second printing, and somebody was like, "Oh yeah," and then they just like went on about the conversation. I was like, "Isn't that a big deal?" Apparently not. It's not a big deal in traditional publishing. I mean, it's not like we're talking about Oliver Twist or some shit like that.
Right.
But that your book went to another printing. It doesn't
300 years from now, Jamar Nicholas rose from the grave and signed his name,
right?
John on the inside front cover.
But yeah, I don't think it matters as much over there. It's very interesting.
I mean, there are bookstores that sell first edition.
Yeah, that's like that is a real thing. But
right,
I think like maybe with I don't know.
Like I'm just wondering because there were, if nostalgia is a fuel for a lot of this forum, the comic book forum, and I'm going to Heroes Con this weekend, which is one of the few comic book conventions. They don't have a media guest, they don't have a voice actor from anything. It's just comic books and fans of comic books. I'm sure there's going to be cosplay there. I'm sure there'll be a vendor selling swords, I bet. But by and large, it's a comic book convention. And I'm wondering, is there, and I saw there's a web Comic-Con coming up. I saw you share that, Jamar, on social media.
Yeah.
Is there a traditional
Comic-Con? So you're going to do it on the web?
No, I think they're bringing in people who draw comics or mostly web comics. Well, the path from web comic to print is pretty linear right now. I mean, almost every successful web comic, it gets a print collection, because it's the most reliable way to monetize it, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, my buddy Nick Selleck, who is a giant webcomic creator and also is on the board with me in the NCS, runs Web Comic Con out in your neck of the woods, Mike, out in Detroit. And he was just
that ain't my neck no more.
And he was just kind of like beating the drum, so I signal boosted that. And people like, this is the second one, and it's been really well received. So that there's an avenue there. Dad, hold on. Let's start the show. 30 minutes later, let's start the show. Guys, welcome. This is we don't have a guest tonight.
Too late.
Joke's on you. There's no guest. But you're stuck with us. We have a really great kind of breezy episode in front of us. Tonight we ask the cartoonists. I really enjoy this graphic that Mike made a couple months ago, because this is our second Ask the Cartoonist. And I love that we're at the place where we have things in the hopper. Like, what are we doing? Well, we have this lined up. We have this lined up. Well, let's do this. And we just drop the graphic in and keep it moving. That's taken a lot of stress off of us. And we give you your internet dollars worth every time we're up and loaded for bear. So what that means tonight is, for anybody that's watching live, ask us a cartooning question. That's what we're here for. And I've gone on rails before saying things like, I think, and this is really interesting, Steve, I want to know how you feel about this, that you see us so much, we start to get normalized to you a little bit. So you're like, oh,
we're not.
Right, and so you're like, oh shit, right? Steve's an expert cartoonist. I almost forgot. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just kind of like, oh right, I should ask Steve a Kickstarter question, because he's done 90 of them. So that's kind of what
he is Kickstarter.
So I figured that this would be a perfect avenue for you guys to ask us a question. Speaking of, well, not question yet, but our buddy El Jamal Walton's in the chat. What up, El Boogie? Jamal says, Heroes is one of the best pure comic conventions. I think I missed what we were talking about there. Okay, here you go. Thanks, Jamal. It's good to see you. Hey, what up, Michael? Michael asks, do any of you collect toys or properties? Do any of you collect toys of properties you worked on and designed? They'll put that out to the room. Anyone have an answer to that? Thanks, Mike.
I had some Warner Brothers toys, some which they sent me when I was on the show. And I have a couple of Darkhawk figures that I bought.
That's great.
And I like seeing. I don't collect as much stuff now. I always see stuff that I like, but it's like, I don't have a Michael Jackson trophy room where I can just like buy and set up stuff. I don't. But I always see stuff like, wow, it would be cool to have a sculpture of that, or that's a really nice figure. I think what was the last thing I bought? It was either a Fantastic Four thing or a Fleischer Superman set. But the older I get, the pickier I become, because there's a lot of stuff that you go like, oh, I like that. But the other day I was thinking, one of the things I enjoyed when I was a kid was building models. And there's a lot of really nice models now, right? And if I had the time, I was thinking, it actually probably would be fun to build a model.
Heck yeah.
I used to really enjoy building model. In fact, I used to work on all that kind of stuff with my buddy John Knoll, who ended up being the head of ILM.
Yeah.
Right? We made films together, stop motion, all that kind of stuff as a kid. And I really enjoyed, and I've even showed that on the podcast. I had some stuff that I built that I still have. But you got to be. That's like a retired person's hobby now. It's like when you're still vital and you're working. So yeah, it's really, in my stage, it's a space issue. Because if I buy something, likely right now it's going to stay in the box because I don't have a place to put it. I'd have to I need to go through and get rid of stuff.
Right.
So that I can keep the stuff that I want, and I would actually even have a place to display it. You can see I have some stuff behind me, and I have some stuff over here, a few things, but I really don't have any extra room right now.
This belongs in a museum. How about you, Steve?
I haven't worked on a lot of other people's properties. I mean, I worked on Star Trek based on the original series, and but I already had like a little bit of nerd tchotchkes from that show to begin with. When I worked on a cover or two for Adventure Time, I got into the show, and I think I picked up a couple of Adventure Time things because I had worked on it. It wasn't something I designed; it was just characters I really grew to like. But now, as I do more stuff, more Dungeons and Dragons compatible books, things like that, it has rekindled my interest in the stuff that I had when I was a kid, and not the stuff I coveted when I was a kid. I never had it as a kid, but that stuff I've definitely begun pursuing, and also because I you know, my appreciation of the artists who I've talked about. Like, I want to maybe get some of them on here because they're awesome. But how about you, Jamar?
Well, hold on. What about all of your middle-aged 3D prints that you have all over?
Yeah, I mean, I've got copies of, I mean, I've got everything I've made and things I've sculpted. There's one here where I find a lovely one that cartoonist Matt Slay painted. Again, I sculpted this guy, but and
look at that. That's so cool.
There was a mini kit. My head stays in focus the whole time. See if Sir Quimp can ever get any limelight.
Put your hand behind it. That might work.
Yep. Oh no!
Oh, he took 2d6 fall damage.
Yeah, he did. I think he lost an arrow or two. But it's a lovely, just a super paint job. But yeah, so I've gotten the things that I've made. I definitely have copies of every book I've worked on. But that's primarily it.
I'm sorry, Steve. You dropped your John. I'm sorry.
That's what glue it black.
That's what glues. It's not the first time. It won't be the last.
But yeah, you know, I don't ever want us to discount the stuff that you actually, you know, created. Like, that's hot that you have your own toys. See, look at the chat, loves it. That's awesome, Mr. Steve. Also, Eternity says you broke it.
Yeah, that's what your D&D characters are for. You know, and plus I can make more.
I love it. Crunch away, we'll make more. With me, like, I don't, you know, a little bit of what Steve's talking about, but I don't have a lot of 3D things. Like, my buddy Stu made me this Leon a while ago. Yeah, this kind of like lives on my desk. I call him 3Dion.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a you know, he will say like he doesn't love it because it's like kind of a early 3D print, but you know, keeping things around like this make me go, man, I really wish I had a 3D printer, and then man, I need a toy line, and then I just start spiraling from there. But you know, also when I did that Marvel Super Stories thing that I drew. I wrote and drew, and I did a MODOK Hulk story. So I got really into like MODOK for a minute, and I bought like one of those Marvel Legends MODOK figures. Have you seen those?
Beautiful.
Not from that Ant-Man movie, that garbage. Like, it looks like MODOK. And
Kirby MODOK.
Yeah, and Manly draws a really great MODOK. There's a picture of me watching Mike draw one of those. And then I kind of like got rid of it. I'm like, well, what am I going to do with this? So, but you know, it was inspiring at the moment. Thanks, Mike. Let's see. So, you know, and the chat populated. I was getting nervous when we first started. It was like 3 people here. Now we
echo.
Now we have a room here. So let me see if there's anything else going on in chat. Hey guys, this is a Ask Me Anything episode, so please ask away.
Ask Cartoonists.
I'm just making sure there's no arrows for my cat to eat.
Yeah. So our buddy Bear Edwards, what up, Bear? Bear says, on that note, does Mike have a snazzy phantom ring like he does in the graphic he drew?
Do I have a what?
You have a phantom ring. You have a Smash Evil ring.
No. I think somebody sent me a ring, or somebody gave me a ring. No, I have one of those. I don't know where he is now. I have a phantom figure from whoever this put out those like Defenders of the Earth or whatever it was. Yeah. No, I don't buy a lot of that. There is actually a fair amount of phantom swag, but no, I'm I don't have. I buy the Hermes reprints. I have bought some of those of the strips,
Oh, okay.
the Siberia strips.
So,
But I
so,
for reference.
so this is funny, just to kind of like bring it back around. If you had your druthers, you would rather have original artwork than a toy.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Something to think about. Also, Steve, when you were picking Sir Quimp off the floor, Sean Chai says it'll be fine after a long rest. Nice D&D joke. I love it. You get 1.8 hit points back.
That's why you use the zap or that super glue, just like you put it right back on.
Yeah, he'll be fine. Right as rain in the morning.
And also, Sean Chai, check again from Australia. Look at that. We're worldwide. You guys were global. Sean Chai says, do any of you have a project or idea that you love but haven't found a way to make it work yet? I'll start with Mike.
I have probably 20 or 30 ideas. And my only issue really is time.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, doing the 2 strips keeps me very busy. So if I was going to add like I just did a job for a Kickstarter, and it took me a while to get that done. On top of, commissions usually take me a little bit longer to get done than I wish. Just because, I basically have 2 full-time jobs.
Yeah.
If I just had 1 strip, then I would have half more time, right? Which would allow me to do a lot of other things. But as long as I'm doing the 2 strips, I really don't. But I have a drawer full of ideas. I could sit down today and come up with an idea that I could think of doing something. Like I was doing you can go on Webtoons and you can look up my Sanctuary 7 webtoon, which I never got a chance to finish. I'd love to do a Skull Kids graphic novel, but when you gotta earn your living, it's kind of hard to do stuff that I'd have to do a Kickstarter. But literally, my main problem is, I already work 80 hours a week easy.
Right.
So, am I going to work 160?
Right.
10 hours a day, 7 days a week, 6 days a week, easily 10 hours a day. So, right. I work doing the strips kind of prevents me from doing a lot of the other things I'd like to do.
Right.
Cool. How about you, Steve?
Yeah, I've got a bunch of ideas, but I mean, my focus has got to be on the Middle Age. It's the best received thing I've done. I'd like to go back and do more Astounding Space Thrills. That was a series I did. It was a comic book starting in 1998. It was a webcomic starting in 1999. I wish I could have more time to work on that. But yeah, I haven't found a way to make it work. I think it had crowdfunding existed then, had Patreon existed back then. A lot of people say, well, maybe that's would keep going. And I think that's probable. I mean, if I could have kickstarted stuff at that time, but we really hadn't cracked monetization apart from banner ads and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And how about you, Jamar?
I'm in the same. I'm in camps with both of you, as I'm totally in the world where Mike is, and I have things from my holy trinity of properties, which it seems to be Leon, Detective Boogaloo, and Jamar Chronicles. Like that, people ask me about those 3 things a lot, and I have ideas for all of them. And just like you were saying, Steve, if Kickstarter and all that stuff was around like in the early aughts, maybe I'd still be doing Detective Boogaloo.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because I definitely would have kickstarted that.
Yeah.
And I also think about, well, maybe I could use Patreon as a platform to develop one of those things. But going back to where Mike is at, there's only 24 hours in a day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And just to balance this stuff out, I know for a lot of people who aspire to make cartooning their full-time thing, which is still a fantastic goal. You're working all the time.
All the time.
You know what I'm saying? So, it's kind of like you're like sitting in your dream.
My advice to the young people is you burn the candle at both ends in the middle when you're young, because your life is less complicated.
Unless you make it complicated.
Right. And then you usually you have a lot of energy to burn. Your life is usually, although not always, is usually cheaper, although you might have a school loan or whatever. But the older you get,
baby mama,
you have responsibilities and priorities. Like when you own a house instead of an apartment, that's a great step. But then that also complicates your life, because then you have to have insurances, and you got taxes, and you got maintenance, and there's all those other things, like, last couple of years, I own my house, but in the last couple of years, I had to, I'm going to have to replace my furnace this year. I rebuilt my front porch. I had to put a new roof on my roof, like another 30-year roof on my roof. I mean, I spent a lot of money, right? So that money that maybe could have been time to draw something actually has to go towards something else.
Right.
And when you're younger, especially if you're still living with your parents, you got time. Or if you're living with roommates, you got time, right? The older you get, you sort of was robbing Peter to pay Paul, as they say, right? So all three of us, to one degree or another, are in that boat, because even getting, let's say it takes you 3 hours or 4 hours to do a page, just to say, right? Pencil, ink. So that's 8 hours for a page. Do you have 8 hours in a week? Right? If you're already working 70, 80 hours a week, now when you got to squeeze a half an hour here, you're drawing a panel there, it starts getting that's the time you're supposed to mop the kitchen floor.
Right.
You need to do that pile of laundry, or shit, now I got to get my taxes to my accountant. Now I got to go through this mountain of paper and go through my taxes. I mean, there's so many complications as you get older. Just like the other day, because I'm incorporated, Chapter S Corporation, Pennsylvania now requires you to file an annual report. So I had to get up in the morning. My accountant sent me the information. I spent 90 minutes, 2 hours on my computer. Answer this question. Now it's not working. I couldn't check out. Did all this stuff and I couldn't check out. It took me. So that was a morning. That was one morning. That could have been a wind down or a warm up, or laying out a page or something, but it went towards some other thing. And I think that sometimes people think that it's like, oh, you just sit down and you just, bling.
Yep.
You just do it. Your life is so uncomplicated, and it's not. Life is very complicated.
I think that's also a nice little side-loaded conversation that I remember I used to have along my journey. Everybody's a journey where I spent probably my 20s in my 30s trying to convince people that what I'm doing is actually a real thing. To then in my 40s trying to manage the time enough to kind of push it over the wall. You know what I'm saying? And during all of those periods, it's a lot of. And I remember I used to explain to people, it's like, well, what do you mean you went to bed at 3 o'clock? I had to finish my strip. and you can't go to bed unless the strip is in, because I can't wake up in the morning and do the strip before I go. Right? It's like it has to be done. Well, I don't know. I would just tell them. I'm just going to tell them anyway.
Right.
You know what I mean? All that,
That's every week. That was yesterday.
Yeah.
Late Sunday.
Yeah.
So I can be up early Monday. And Mimi was inking background, so I was waiting for her to give me some background so I could plug the background. So it's like, yeah, you're tired, but you need the thing to be in tomorrow. Should have been in Friday, but I'll send it in early Monday. You got to do your job. You don't love it at that point.
Yeah.
It's not fun. It's not like drawing rocks on the thing or, some vanish thing or something. It's like, oh man, you got to letter it. You got to check your lettering. You got to check the spelling. You got to do all these things, and it's not fun. It's a job, right? And if you don't get it done, nobody else is going to do it.
That's real. So maybe the last thing I'll say about this is that also, you learn from just being on the track, right? If I had a conversation with 20-something-year-old Jamar that one day you'll have a 275-page book that you're turning at the end of the year. I'd go, what?
Jamar, you gotta go on a $35 page. You gotta get it done. Something wrong with your traffic novel.
88 gigawatts. Right, you know what I mean? So, but it scales. It really does. And for us to talk so lightly about it is like we all have like war PTSD. You know what I mean? It's kind of like this is the part of being a professional. This is just what it is. This is the water we breathe. And
well, you worked your way up to that though with each little project, each graphic novel, your own self-published.
Yeah.
Leon, your fist, stick, knife, gun. Yeah. Right. So you sort of you started walking deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the pool, right? You can even imagine if you told the 20-year-old Jamar, we got to do 275 pages or whatever, you would be like, how the hell am I going to draw that many?
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I say that to myself now, but you sit down and do it, and that's the difference, right? Yeah, that's great. All right, let's go to some more questions. Thank you, guys. So we'll go to our buddy Randy Clute. Randy, what's going on? Randy says, do any of you have any global / historic / underrated cartoonists that you wish were more known in the U.S.? What a great question, Randy. I'll start with Stone Cold. Stone Cold, what do you think?
Well, I like what Fabrice said the other day of Yves Chaland. I think that's a wonderful cartoonist, and it's not too many people know about Yves Chaland's work.
He died a long time ago.
Yeah, very young.
In the 80s, right? I think he passed.
Yeah, super young, but amazing clean style, very lively, beautiful line. Very almost like what 50s clip art is imagined to be. But super lovely, energetic cartooning. And Hugo Pratt, I would say another one, who Cordo Maltese, that's another person who's just a stunning cartoonist. And then I guess, I mean, a lot of people know Urasawa now from Pluto and the animated series, but I think as a cartoonist, that's just like should be required reading for everybody.
Yeah. Wow. You picked some bangers, and Urasawa's doing that Man Bin essay show on YouTube that I've downloaded so many times, and people it keeps getting knocked off of YouTube and somebody re-uploads it. I think it's breaking some protocols. It gets across the time-space continuum, but it's so good. Mike, what about you? Mike, I'm sure you got a laundry list of people to mention. Right?
Yeah, I mean, like historically, there's a lot of cartoonists. Well, like Jordi Bernay is mostly known for Torpedo and a little bit of Jonah Hex, but he's done a ton of other stuff in Europe over the years. Didier Conrad is another fantastic cartoonist. I love his stuff. I mean, there's a lot of guys in the Belgian, French Belgian school. They're all like that. Conrad is one of those guys. I have a lot of his work, and he's probably I think he was working for DreamWorks for a while. And Jean-Claude Mézeret, the guy who did Valerian, pretty much forgotten now, The only guy that still really gets out of that whole gang, I think, that constantly gets sort of recycled is Mobius, because kids are still discovering Mobius, and he was probably 10 times more prolific than anybody else. Right. I'm constantly seeing new stuff by him. Like every week I see new drawings by Mobius, and the guy's been dead a decade. Right? It's just like, what's going on? Right? Is he in a time bubble somewhere?
He's the Prince of Comics.
Yeah, there's a lot of Italian guys. There's a lot of and I can't remember all their names now, but there's a lot of Italian Disney guys that are really fantastic, and I've slowly been buying. I got something here. This book I bought last year.
Oh wow, it's beautiful.
Right. Graphic novel.
Oh, that's man. That type is so tiny. Wow, that's great.
And then there's Ruben Pellejero, who also does Corto Maltese now. He's fantastic. He also did a great strip called Dieter Lumpen that they used to run in Heavy Metal.
Mm-hmm.
I love his stuff. He's fantastic. I mean, there's a lot of great European artists. The great thing now is between Amazon France and a few other bookstores like Stuart Eng, you can pretty much get anything you want now, right? Because it used to be that you would have to go to a lot of stuff like that I bought in the old days. I would go to San Diego and I would go see the people like Tony Raiola and people like that, or Bud Plant there were specialty people who would bring stuff just to San Diego, and I would spend like $1,000 buying graphic novels.
Yeah, so at San Diego there was this one or two booths that was just like someone set up the best graphic novel artist bookstore ever in this small 10 by 10, 20 by 10 area, and and if you wondered why your artist that you wanted to see wasn't at their table, it was because they were there.
Yeah,
drool it over the pages.
Yeah.
I guess I'm gonna go. So I'm all over the road, and I've always had, I don't know, kind of more like, I don't know, street level tastes. Maybe I guess that's what I'd say. Like if you think about like Daredevil and Black Falcon in Harlem, I never. You be uptown, you won't be up here. What's up, Black Falcon? I want to give us some indie shout outs. Shout out to Andrew Neal, who's doing Meeting Comics. And Andrew's a good friend, and he's probably doing the smartest, kind of continually published mini comics out. This stuff is beautiful. And Ben Passmore, who is probably known more for like he did that mini comic called Your Black Friend, and also he's done work in the Nib, and he's such a strong political voice. Even in Kidlit, Aaron Nell Stanky, who does Mr. Wolf's Class, it's really good. And the people I'm talking about, they're not Mobius, right? They're not like French guy that you guys just talked about. But the storytelling is so strong, and the world building is so great that they're worth a look. Also, I got to give a shout out to Tezuka. I don't think Tezuka gets enough credit, even though people talk about the stuff. I don't think people read it, And I know like Pluto is kind of making the rounds. We just talked about that a second ago, right?
That's
Which
like an updated version of
that one Astro Boy story, like the world's strongest robot. I forget the name of it. But Dark Horse put out some paperback collections a while ago, if you can find them, of the Astro Boy stories. They're good.
Dark, man. Dark. The original Astro Boy is actually kind of dark.
Yeah, it's
very like Pinocchio.
Yeah, it's very Pinocchio. Yeah,
very scary like Pinocchio.
And also my favorite thing, I was just talking to my Patreon chat about it. It's like, you remember the one meme where you see Tezuka, who's always wearing his beret, and it says, "You like anime? I invented it." Like, let's give respect where it's due. Read some.
I would say, if you want to see what I like, go on my Instagram and look at who I follow. I got tons of great artists from all over the world that I follow their Instagram feed. So you'll discover a lot of really cool people that way.
Yeah. We could just do a whole episode on this. Oh, also shout out to Kia Asamiya, who has had some really interesting runs in the American comics. But now shit, this is falling out of my head. He did Steam Detectives. And I love that stuff. It's kind of like big robot, giant Inspector Gadget buttons. Oh, I love giant.
Big robot. I like that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And that stuff is kind of underrated, and you kind of see the style, but don't know where it came from. Right. You know what I mean? And Kenshi Sonata, Gunsmith Cats. I got Mike with that. Gunsmith Cats is dope. It's just in his attention to inorganic objects. Like, he draws the hell out of a muscle car, but then his main characters are the most anime looking people. It's almost like a weird connection, the way that stuff works. Let's move on with our we're getting all into the weeds here. All right, I'm going to go back into the chat. And Randy says, thanks for answering my question. You're welcome. And people are talking amongst themselves, so I don't want to get it too twisted. I'll ask one more question, and then I'll hand it over to Steve to ask some questions. Let's see. Eternity, who's your favorite artist, original artwork that you wish you had? And I don't even want to ask Mike because he has it. Ha! You like original art? Good, because I have it all.
Hardly.
That's the manly meme.
Hardly. I don't have a Neil Adams page, right? I don't have a Neil Adams, and I will never have a Neil Adams page now because they're like insane, right? I bought some stuff when I was young, and I started getting in stuff that I could afford to buy. But yeah, now it's like, forget it. If I want to sell my house, you can buy a Fantastic Four page.
Right?
Like, you want a prime Kirby Senate page. I have a couple Kirby pages, but I don't have a prime Kirby Senate page. And now you're talking, $200,000 per page. So I'd love to have Alex Raymond. I have some Raymond Rip Kirby dailies. I'd love to have a Flash Gordon, but again, you know, if you're talking about what they call the Grail pages or whatever, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it's you could buy a Foster easier than you can buy a Raymond, right? Because even though in the pantheon of artists, he's like the king, really, in the way, because he's sort of the guy who started realism in comic strips. His, you know, Prince Valiant was never as popular as, well, artistically, I don't think he was as appealing as Raymond. The Flash Gordon stuff was also racier. You know, there was some. Now I was lucky when I worked, shared Al Williamson's studio. He had like a gazillion of them. You know, so I got to like work with like a Raymond here and a Foster here, you know, so I could study him. But yeah, there's very few things. I'd like a nice Neil Adams page, and I have some nice Kubert stuff. I'd love a nice Russ. I have a Russ Heath, but I would like a nice, like a Sergeant Rock. But again, you're talking about now. You're getting to the point. 20 years ago, you could buy one if you found one. Now, I mean, you can buy one, but once the Hollywood people, and I also think that people realize that buying art was a way of investing money, like the people would buy an Andy Warhol, then that value goes up. That's a way of like parking your money.
Right.
Fairly safe way of parking your money. You know, and people keep talking about whether the comic book art field will crash because, you know, the prices are literally getting insane. So you wonder what if at some point will it will just all, you know, fold in.
How about you, Steve?
In terms of comic book art, there's probably a Wally Wood page. I would love to get a Wally Wood page. I would love to get like, I mean, a grail piece for me would be that first page of that Curse story, the Curse that he wrote.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that was the one that the first page of his I ever saw, the one that kind of set me in a cartoonist direction that was more than just, you know, comic strips. Not that just comic strips, not to say just comic strips, but just in terms of a bigger space to work in. An actual piece. What's that? Mike?
That was good stuff, and you know, I've never seen a page of that for sale. So my theory is somebody has that whole story.
Wow. But there's a piece I know I want. It's anyone's got to spare $15,000. It's in the Drew Struzan gallery. The cover he did for Astounding Space Thrills issue 3.
You got Struzan to do one for you. Wow.
Yeah. He did the cover of issue 3 of Astounding Space Thrills, and it's gorgeous. And it's in his gallery. It's available at yeah, a little rich for my blood.
Are we talking about? We're talking about art pages, right? It can't be other type of media from a creator.
Yeah, we're in charge. You can be whatever you want.
That's right. This is our platform. I can say whatever I want.
Yeah.
You know, I'll keep it simple. I would love. I'm gonna have to like go to Canada and like sweep hair in a studio. I would love a Dave Cooper painting.
Wow.
A painting.
Yeah. Yeah, like there's some. I have some pencil drawings of Dave's that he sent along, but I would love a painting.
I have a Pippin Norton page.
Oh, you do? Wow, it's really clean too. Like his stuff.
Yeah, and it's actually very small.
Mm-hmm.
It's much smaller. You know,
yeah.
I think it's not that much larger than the printed size.
Oh, well, he was
like a quarter up or something. It's not that big.
No, he was almost the size. But, all right, but yeah, thanks for that, you guys. Steve, there's like one in the chat if you wanna grab.
We've got Robert Alvarez on the YouTube saying, "How about Sergio?" That's
How about Sergio, Steve?
How about Sergio? I would say massively influential as a kid, just because of how much he was able to do with such little space where I saw his work and all the marginalia inside Mad Magazine. Yeah, a genius.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I've loved Sergio stuff from afar for a long time, and even kind of like when I was going through my young kid fandom, I was kind of transfixed in other places, and was always really curious about like Gru the Wanderer. And I don't think my cartooning sensitivity was turned up enough to respect what Sergio was doing. You know what I mean? But now, kind of looking back at it, I was like, holy shit, why wasn't I reading this stuff?
Yeah.
You know, it's so amazing. And now that I've gotten a chance to kind of talk with him a little bit and like spotlight him in the NCS, and it's just, you know, the studio is just like it's like a dragon's hoard of treasures. And I was just like, oh man, it's so pure, and he's been such a big part of our cultural history for so long time. Because I remember when this was just not too long ago, a couple months ago, and I was talking to some neighbors about me having this really big event with Sergio, and they were like, who? I was like, remember bloopers and practical jokes? Remember the little animated things? The guy would like sweep the floor across the yeah, oh my God, that's him. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many different entry points to Sergio's work in our culture,
right?
And he's such a sweet man. Like, holy crap! You know, Sergio's fantastic.
There's a lot of guys like that. I think from my early interest in cartooning, it was like Mad Magazine, and you had such a smorgasbord of different stuff, right? So Sergio was in there. As also the guy was Paul Coker Jr. I liked his stuff. My favorites were, of course, Drucker and Davis, but they're almost, again, sort of forgotten in a way because they're reprinted. But I think that kind of humor is not in vogue. And I talked to Sergio a little bit now, and that sort of pantomime, which is what he does, that is, it's like, what venue do you have? The venue of cartooning, available places for you to cartoon, are really different, right? And part of that is also a generational sense of humor, right? And it's sort of like when we were kids and somebody who might have been very good drew a hippie, you knew right away that person didn't really know a hippie.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think with guys of that generation, they would have to, in some respects, change their iconography so that young people would understand, would recognize what they were drawing. Right? If you draw a guy with a hat and it doesn't look like Jamar's hat, it doesn't look like there's a certain iconography to a young person that says, this is not from my time. It's like when Steve Ditko drew hats, he drew hats forever, right, in his work, which always marked it as something that was of a different era. Something of a different era. When they would draw a gang and everybody in the gang was a different color, or a different nationality, you knew that was not something that was real, because there were gangs in my neighborhood, and there wasn't like an Hispanic guy and a Chinese guy and an American Indian. They weren't like the Village People.
It was a black guy with a gold dollar sign.
Right. So I think part of it.
One was a robot.
Right. Yeah, Pin Pop 5,000. I think it's a combination of things. I think it's venue and iconography because, and this is not a criticism of someone like Sergio, but I just think guys of that generation, because he's still vital, he's still doing good stuff. He was showing us stuff last week, stuff that he was doing, great. But there's a different sensibility that will register with somebody who was 15 or 14 or 13 or 10.
Yep.
I started reading Mad Magazine, right, in the late 60s, early 70s. They were drawing current culture. They were mocking current culture, right? If you're going to mock current culture now, it looks really different.
Yeah.
Really, really, really different. The way TV shows look, the way celebrities look, the way their clothes look, that whole, and it's not even like MTV, like somebody would think, oh, it's like MTV. It's like, no, it's not. That's old. That's grandma shit now.
Yeah.
You know, Britney Spears is grandma shit now, right? So I think you're always dealing with that in the way something is, what is drawn and how it's drawn, right? Like we always talk about it, but I think like manga, like when we were kids, Disney was almost like a house style. Like Kirby was sort of like a house style, or Kurt Swan or Neil Adams was kind of like a house style. And you don't, and like anime is like the default house style. And you have people who draw, like my mentee, I was talking to her. She goes, well, I'm not really a manga or anime fan, yet her work looks like that because that is, that's just in the air.
Yeah.
You know, so would it affect the work to the point where you wouldn't be able to recognize like a certain sense of cartooning? There's an aesthetic of cartooning from the last century that if you do it now makes it look older because it doesn't look like all the expressions you see on anime, you see on memes. That's just part of our culture, right? The anime face is like the standard face. Your memes on your iPhone look like anime, right? Mm-hmm. They don't look like Sergio or Jack Davis or Peanuts or whatever. That even on that basic level, that's changed. And so people looking at that, if they looked at the other thing, you sort of have to develop the taste to be able to appreciate and like understand that old way of drawing and representing things, just like the faces. Mm-hmm. Like if the anime face from the side, the mouth is like inside the cheek.
Yeah.
That is a whole different thing than cartooning before that.
Pac-Man mouth.
Right. The little slit nose. Mm-hmm. Everybody used to have pickle noses, kind of. Right? That was sort of a standard animation thing, or even in a comic. Fred Flintstone's nose, or like even Charlie Brown's nose was not a little triangle thing. So all that is really the iconography of basic cartooning has been completely manga-ized, I think.
Manga eyes are watching you.
On top of where do you do that kind of, outside of Mad, where would you do the margin cartooning? Where would you do that sort of visual?
It'd have to be a comic strip. I think it could be a web comic. I mean, I think there's quite a few comic strips that are wordless and pantomime. This one I can't think of it. The little It's kind of a supernatural. It kind of has an Eddie Munster quality to the character, the main character. It's always wordless.
Patrick the Wolf Boy?
No, it's a comic strip. It's actually syndicated. It's a syndicated comic strip. It's
Sluggy Freelance. No.
Ziggy. No,
Sinfest.
Ziggy.
What's that?
No, Sinfest.
Goth,
No, that's
Goth
not
Ziggy.
But-
you say Ziggy?
Goth Ziggy.
Always Ziggy. But I do think it could work as a comic, as a standalone comic strip. But I don't think there's any kind of I don't know, any kind of support material that would allow you to just add it as a bonus.
And I don't think anybody's saying this is bad. It's just what it is. And
No,
even
observation. These are just sort of observations. I mean, one of the things that happened in the last century, from the beginning, where newspapers, all commercial printing grew, magazines grew, everything proliferated all through the last 100 years, and through that, you had an environment that was always growing and competing, and allowed artists for a century to develop a whole visual language of cartooning in the last 100 years, right? But a lot of that has really changed, also because the market has fragmented. Everybody read Mad. Now hardly anybody reads Mad.
Sure.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So you had these major magazines and major places that everybody looked toward. Everybody was reading, and you really don't have that. Like you had cartoons, magazines just about, cars, right? Those guys, Trosley and all those guys were fantastic.
Right.
Fantastic. I used to get that stuff sometimes as a kid. You don't really have that type of environment now.
Cool. Thanks. So we got a lot of meat off that bone. So, and we're gonna start wrapping up because one of our pretty hosts has to get ready to be in another side of the country.
How long will it take you to get there?
About 8 hours.
That's 8 hours driving like.
I don't drive like that. I'm a slowpoke. Plus, at my age, I have to stop every 20 minutes for a bathroom break or something like that.
Well, you got to take the truck driver's friend.
What a Gatorade bottle.
Or as Mom would call it, a big old mayonnaise jar.
Mayonnaise jar is way too open. The spillage.
Well, you can get the truck driver's friend. It's like actually angled.
How do we get in here?
I apologize to everyone right now.
Oh my God! All right,
our friend is your friend.
Yeah, side mouth. I love that we have lexicon. I think we got Mike with side mouth. Side mouth.
You can use it as a avoiding a pit stop or for siphoning gas.
What's that like? Everybody's doing hand jive. Side mouth. Everybody's side mouthing. All right, we're getting goofy. All right, our last thing for the night, our buddy El Jamal says, modern comic art prices are crazy. Currently, I'm collecting comic strips on my birthday and birth date when possible. Does anyone know a comic strip artist that may have July 7th strips? That's interesting. That's very specific, too. Well,
Mike will have 2, I think.
Yeah, Mike, pull your July 7th for El Jamal.
Yeah, I'd be lucky if I could find them at this point. Jeez. I actually just bought a bunch of cartons to actually start putting all the giant stacks of the Phantom and Judge Parker, packing them away.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it was just archiving and stuff. It's got to be a thing. And one of our last episodes, we were talking about selling originals, right? And I remember I had a very strong answer. So in my case, people aren't lining up outside of my house to buy Leon pages. And it's not a knock on my own work, but it's like, we're still kind of in this era where people are in love with characters, not the creator. You know what I mean? So if I had a bunch of Daredevil pages, I'm sure I could unload them. You know what I mean? But as we're saying, we're talking about people who've been dead for decades who were just like, oh, nobody's ever heard of this dude, and he's dust. He's dust now, and they still haven't heard of him. So I'm not holding my breath on that part, but I know that we do have some people that are very loyal to our campaigns, and make it worth doing the things we do. So I appreciate everybody who comes on to our chat and does business with us. So let's start wrapping it up. As all of us have to get back to the table. I hope you guys enjoyed this very special Ask Me Anything episode. And it was really chill, right? The time went by so fast. We didn't even get started until 30 minutes in. So I appreciate it. Mike, any last words for the Ask Me Anything? What'd you think of this session?
There's still time to ask.
You got a minute. We're going to turn.
You got 1 minute.
We're turning this off, bro.
We're 1 minute. Now, maybe I can show somebody something here, just for the heck of it. Let's see. Let me see here. Let's see here. Wait a minute. They changed everything.
Well, while Mike's pulling a rabbit out of his hat, I'd like to give a shout out to next week's guest. Buzz Hassan will be here. You know Buzz, the living corpse, fantastic cartoonist who's usually like at the hip with his buddy Ken Heiser. I think Buzz will be on, and we're going to talk about the business. We're going to talk about your properties going into different media. We're going to talk about horror, and drawing horror. I have to say horror like that so people don't get it confused in the chat. And so many other things. Buzz is a generational talent, and I can't wait to have him on. Yeah, look, Jamal's like, wait, not both of them, just Buzz? Yep, they come in separate packages. Mike, did you find what you were looking for?
Yeah, I think I found something. Hold on a second. Let's see what's here. I was going to show what I was working on this week.
Oh, okay.
If it will allow me.
Oh, are you sharing?
Yeah, let me see.
Steve, you want to grab that?
Yeah, I'll keep an eye out for it.
Yeah, we're in the pipe, 5x5. I love that part of Aliens where they were like, what does that mean? Like, it doesn't have any military reference. They just made it up.
Do you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so this, I'm working on a Phantom daily. So you can see I started inking it. And then there's my pencil.
Wow.
Yeah, there's my pencil. So.
Wow, I love how you just kind of hashing in.
Yeah, and here's another one. This is a flashback, so I had to get reference. One of Jermaine, one of the Phantom Chronicle Chamber guys helped me out with getting some reference for this shot of the wedding of the Phantom. So yeah,
Oh, wow. I love that eye line you put on there between the characters. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to put it. If you don't, I always draw a little eye line.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't draw if you draw the eye line, it also you get the angle of the head.
Yeah.
Tilt the angle of the head, because it's really easy to just draw a head, then you draw another head, and then the characters actually are not looking at each other.
Right. That's like the issue with those CG movies where it's like, look at the ping pong ball.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if I turned her head just down a little bit, she wouldn't be looking at him, and then it doesn't register that the characters are acting.
Right.
Right.
That's great.
And sometimes it's literally a smidge, a 16th of an inch, a little slight turn of the. And in fact, people rarely everybody here, look, their head is angled differently.
Oh yeah.
Right? People are never perfectly right. When you're looking, your body is sitting in the chair, right? Your body is moving. When you start studying that and you pay attention, it's sometimes just a little thing like that. A little counter tilt of the shoulder versus the head versus the maybe a slight rotation will give life to something that otherwise, even in a scene of like talking heads, and I do a lot of talking heads in the strip, one head person this way, one person this way, counter arcs, little things like that will give the character, will give the character life, the layout life. Sometimes it's just a very, very simple thing. I think I got more of that coming from animation.
Cool.
Because in animation,
Like that.
characters are moving, and so when you cut between scenes, you want there to be a variety. If you keep cutting and everything is exactly the same, it pops. It looks weird. So you weight somebody over this way and you tilt them this way. And then they cut to the person they're talking to, and they're over here, and you weight it that way. So they're relating to each other. Like if two people are standing behind each other, you don't have them perfectly even.
No.
One's a little lower, and maybe one's leaning this way and one's leaning that way. Well, if you break it down to like the most basic design shapes, so little things like that, slight little tweaks can add a lot. Can take something that's completely boring or stiff, and you just move it a little bit, tilt it a little bit, and it'll make your characters, and especially people looking, because we all know if I'm doing this, now I'm not looking at you.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm looking at you. If I do even that, right, just that little bit, I'm not looking. Oh, I'm looking at somebody behind you, and I'm looking at you. Oh, there's that pretty girl coming in. Oh, right. We're so sensitive to that as people, to the shape of that, of a human being, a silhouette, the angle of heads, people looking. I think that's all deeply wired in our brains from survival, probably all the way back to when we were monkeys or whatever, because we're really sensitive about that stuff.
The saber-toothed tiger era. I love it.
Right. Something moving in the woods, that's a human. That's not a human, right? So you really see it. You really see it too. There's always a website I recommend. I hope it's still up. It's called 1,000 Frames of Hitchcock.
Mm.
And it had 1,000 frames from every one of his movies. And if you want to study how to make great storytelling compositions, go there and look at it. Just look at it, because it's like a storyboard of his film. And you can see how he uses the background, how the eye lines work, all that stuff is all there. It's just like I looked at that quite a bit when I started storyboarding.
That's awesome. Thanks for that, Mike, and thank you guys for checking us out. We gotta pull the plug on this episode, but we had a lot of fun tonight. Thank you so much. This is what we do every week, every Wednesday, EST, 8 p.m. You get it. I would be remiss if I didn't tell us to prepare for the end game. Cumberbatch told me we're in the end game, and let's go to that cold, dark night and watch this.
It's actually quite muggy tonight.
It is quite.
It's a muggy night.
Well, I gotta.
Muggy hands. Draw those muggy hands.
All right, we're out. We'll see you guys next week. Be good. Peace.